All right, welcome to our live stream, How to Get Over a Breakup Successfully with Chris Seiter here. Sorry for the delay. We had a little bit of some tech issues, some scheduling issues, but we got it going now. Hopefully everyone can see us. And also feel free to post your questions in the chat since we'll be answering some questions here as we go. And so welcome, Chris. Good to have you on the show. And also Antia is joining. It's going to be all three of us today.
Thanks for having me.
We're like the Three Musketeers.
Yes, I love it. Except there's actually four, so we need a fourth.
Oh, there's four Musketeers. I never knew that. I always
Well,
say
the audience.
It's the Three Musketeers, but there's like D'Artagnan, or there's like actually four in the book or movie. If memory serves. Okay,
I'm sure it's like really relevant for the women
breakups.
watching.
Well, the woman watching, she'll be the fourth one.
Yes.
Overcoming your breakup, Chris.
Yes. Not Four Musketeers, Three Musketeers, whatever.
Yeah. Well, we're so excited to have you. Ladies, for those of you who don't know, I mean, Chris is like a very dear friend of mine, and we've done lots of collaborations together. And even when we talk privately, we always just think we should have just turned on the camera, just like done the whole thing while you guys were watching. You know, we're always having discussions like that going on. So I'm really excited to bring Chris to you today, and just really let's talk about how to get this question that I get all the time. Antia, how do I get over this breakup? How do I heal from a breakup?
Yeah, well, we could talk about several things. We could talk about overcoming a breakup. Also, if you want to get back with your ex, we can mention that as well, because that could be part of dealing with a breakup successfully. If it doesn't turn into a breakup anymore, then you've successfully dealt with it. But yeah, we can go into all those areas, and we'll see what questions we have coming in as well. And in fact, I may even already have some questions coming in. So if you're watching right now, please submit your questions, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, post your questions as we go through this chat. We'll be able to hopefully get to as many as we can today. And in fact, I think we already have one that came in here. I'm going to read it, and we can already start diving in that way if we want. Okay, so our first question comes from, she asked, what are the things that I should be doing if I'm the new girlfriend, 2 months, and his ex-girlfriend of 17 years is actively trying to get him back? In other words, should I push him going no contact, or should I be okay with him texting, emailing her, etc.? He feels a lot of guilt towards the situation. So this is interesting because she has her ex who is trying to get over his ex.
But the ex is trying to get her new boyfriend
meta,
back.
Chris, you know, it's a whole different level.
This is like
she must be
Inception. A dream within a dream. Usually, actually, the funny thing, I'm on the other side. I'm usually, the clients I get are usually the girl who's trying to get the guy back who's moved on to the new person. And really, I would say if you want to revolve it around sort of an attachment style type theory, it always kind of comes back to that, I found. So it's really about just being secure with your relationship, but also I think it's okay to set boundaries a little bit and just kind of at least have a conversation with your boyfriend that this is bothering you and you need to set a boundary on figuring out how to handle that. So both of you kind of know going forward, but I'm actually kind of curious to get Antia's take. Tag, you're it.
That's so interesting. Oh my God. I go like, I mean, what I always look at is, why would you even attract a man into your life who is sort of still not quite clear, right? Because if his energy was clear, then why does the ex still think? And I mean, that's where you come back in, Chris, right? Where like, doesn't matter. But like if an ex-boyfriend is like really clear with the woman, right? Like, look, it's over. I'm so over it. I'm so moved on. I already have a new girlfriend. You know what I mean? All the things. Like, do you think there's still like the possibility that the woman like still wants to have him back? Because my philosophy is that like when he's crystal clear, like she has nowhere to come in. So the only reason why she tries to get him back is because he must be not completely clear and congruent inside of himself, and with his confidence or trusting himself, whatever the case may be, that this is over. What's your take on that?
Well, so I come at it from sort of a similar approach, which is like usually, all right, so I'm coming at this from you're in the relationship with the guy, and Auntie has a good point. Like usually if the guy is not hung up on an ex, he's sort of indifferent to the ex. Like he just won't even let that person into the picture. But what's interesting is I can provide sort of the perspective of the person who's actually trying to get him back. Because predominantly those are the people who end up coming into my orbit. And we talk a lot about this concept called the being there method, which is this method we found that really kind of revolves around attachment styles. But really it's about you just being really secure and creating almost like friend zoning yourself with the guy. And by just doing that one act, the person that he's with, their anxious side gets triggered and they end up blowing the relationship up. So if you want this relationship to work, it's important that you don't kind of fall victim to that. You set the secure boundaries. And sometimes that does mean what Antia said, which is sort of recognizing that this guy should not really be engaging with the ex to this level, potentially.
Mm.
And then also like the big piece is having actually like an authentic conversation with him, right? Like to be like, I mean, why do you think, there was this one post on Instagram, I think what it wasn't about like, do you have a girlfriend? But it's like, is there anyone existing in this world who thinks that they're in a relationship with you, right? So what that says is like, okay, like, why do you think that your ex is trying to get you back? Right? Like, so put him actually in a position of like, oh, well, we're still talking sometime. I mean, just text, just harmless. You know what I mean?
I think the common thing we hear is, oh, I'm just being nice. I'm just being nice to her. I feel bad for her or feel bad for him.
Yeah, totally. And so, yeah, I mean, and that's then depending on what he says, that's really about, then it's time to set boundaries, right? Because it's like, well, I guess it's like, you need to make a decision, you know what I mean? Like, because obviously she doesn't just think you're just friends, and that's like the piece too. I mean, what is she doing if he's blind to the fact that she wants to have him back? And he just, he's just like, well, I just want, you know what I mean? And I don't know if he had like all sisters or whatever the case may be, is that he doesn't want to be the heartbreaker, or he doesn't want to be mean, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, there's like something to face inside of himself, like a shadow, like there's something he doesn't want to be perceived as. Would you agree with that, Chris?
As you were talking, I was thinking, I think maybe there's a part of him that kind of likes it. He kind of likes the attention, and maybe there's something with that, where he feels maybe so insecure with himself that he needs the adoration, not only of his girlfriend, but these other girls that kind of like him.
Yeah, totally. Like, and what that means is that there's actually like a distortion, right? Because like he has such a high need for significance. So, Tony Robbins talks about the 6 human needs. And so it's like, okay, so he needs to find a new way to meet his need for significance, because he can't meet it through getting attention. And it's like, what kind of feels good to the ego? You know what I mean? She texts me and she checks in, and, she's kind of hot, and you know what I mean? Even though I don't want her, but it feeds my need of significance, right? So if that's the case, and I don't know how aware this guy is and how much self-development he's done, so where you could potentially talk about this concept of significance, and like really seeing how else could he meet a significance outside of getting it from the ex.
Yeah, it's not exactly a healthy way to gain your identity through other people saying, like finding out. It's not going to lead to a healthy relationship, I guess, is my point.
Yeah, totally. But what about if we flip it? What if he like not necessarily doesn't like it, but like he doesn't want to be perceived as like, let's say, selfish or mean or heartless, or right? And then it's something for him to work through. That's something where, and this Brody did so much work with men around like the wild man, right? Like the pieces that the man doesn't want to face, right? Because he's like afraid to lose his identity, or how he perceives himself to be, right? Or what makes him a man, or what makes him attractive to a woman, or that's just not the kind of person. I mean, I'm just not that kind of person. You know what I mean? I am not just like kind of go to cold turkey with people. That's not me.
Well, I think I don't want to dive too much into this because I know there's probably other people commenting, but it's interesting with the man stuff you were just talking about. I think society can kind of play a role into that as well. Like if he's surrounded himself with a bunch of people who have almost made him think you need to be, dating all of these type of girls, that's not going to lead to a healthy identity. Usually it's usually going to lead to a very unhappy type of a person who feels like they're putting up a front and is not being true to the person that they are.
Yeah, totally. And like I almost feel like that the relationship that he would have with you is like, it wouldn't be enough for him. Like he always needs sort of like exactly what Chris was just saying, that he'll always like his head will like turn to something else, maybe another woman or a work project or something else. And why is that? Like, why is that? It's like this, either the grass is greener or like, there's always something that needs to be filled. What's that insecurity all about? That's what I would get curious about. And honestly, also asking myself, is this a match for me? Instead of you just thinking, what can I do to keep him? It's also like asking yourself, do I want to keep him?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Do I want to deal with someone like that?
Yeah. Yeah, Sonia asks on your channel, Chris, my ex says we are done, but doesn't delete my number. Why is that? So I guess they're still texting, and even though he said that they're done, they're still texting. Why is he still texting her, I guess, is probably the question.
I mean, I would be, it depends obviously what you want to do. If you want to get him back, you want to get over him. But I feel like sometimes with breakups, there's this nostalgia that you don't want to let go of. And so a lot of times what happens is you kind of end up in these patterns that you got into in the relationship. So, I mean, honestly, I'm dealing with people who are blocked, who have had their number deleted, who have been blocked on Facebook and Instagram. So what does it mean? It probably just means he's getting into that nostalgia. He can't quite quit the addiction of the breakup, and sometimes I found too, there's an emotional aspect to it where you are providing an emotional support that he is almost using you for. So he breaks up with you, but he still wants the emotional support. So those are kind of some of the top reasons, I would think.
Do you want to respond to that, or do you want to just go to the next question?
Yeah, I mean,
I have something to say to that too. Go ahead.
If you have something to say about it, you can say it first, Snuggie.
Okay.
I mean,
by
Antia.
the way,
I can't call you Snuggie anymore because we need to know who you are. Antia.
I know, I like Snuggie. Is that Chris? I don't know.
It is me. I like that. Keep it up, Brody.
I gotta get pet names for all our guests.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's actually like a really good piece, right? But the other piece also I want to address too is any dysfunction. So I mean, I don't know anything about this guy, but is this guy having like dysfunctional codependent patterns, right? Where like I'm not there, but I'm kind of still holding on to something, right? And it's like kind of like what Chris already alluded to, which is like, there's something in it for him. There's something where he's like kind of thinking about himself. Like he's not really thinking about the impact that it has on you. I'm sorry, but he doesn't, Sonia. He's really, this is for him. He's doing that for himself. He doesn't want to completely cut the cords because, like it could be just reasons of like, he doesn't want to feel the full emotional impact. He's emotionally unavailable, and this piece too with emotionally unavailable men, they will always have like some sort of anchor. That's the thing. Like my women always think like, oh, they just like disappear, right? Because that's why they're emotionally unavailable. No, the worst part is that they never disappear. If they had it their way, they would just stay anchored in your life in some way, shape, or form, and dangle the proverbial carrot in front of your nose. Go ahead, Chris.
No, yeah, I mean, you're hitting it right on the mark. So we've polled our community. So I think you said this came from my channel. So we polled our community. Like 75% of these women and men's exes are dismissive avoidant. And what do dismissive avoidants do? They love sort of that phantom ex. So that anchor that you're talking about is like exactly what's potentially happening here. So
Yeah, that makes sense. The anchor, the almost like a safety net as well, emotional safety net.
Yeah. And one thing I just want to leave you with, Sonia, because I see it like from a from your perspective, it's why would you quote unquote unconsciously create a pattern where he like kind of keeps the number, right? It's sort of like keeping the hope alive. It's almost like dead. It's almost like on life support, right? When a person's on life support, it's like we're knowing like as soon as we're pulling the plugs that they're dead, then they can't sustain themselves anymore, right? And so it's kind of like holding on for dear life like this. And where have you done this in your past? You know what I mean? Where have your parents not showed up in a way where you're like, if I'm just gonna, dad said he didn't hold true to his promise, or, you know what I mean? He said he's gonna do this, but then he didn't show up, or mom said, and then, there's like this hope that you don't want to let it die. And that's actually what really needs to happen. You need to let the hope die, because otherwise it becomes this never ending nightmare, really, because it doesn't end.
Yeah, Silver Lining said, my ex dumped me 2 weeks ago, but I'm doing no contact and I still miss him, and I don't know if he will ever contact me again.
That sounds like it's on Chris's channel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of mine. I get a variation of this. And it's not really a question. I think they're just trying to vent. And
yeah, I was gonna say that actually doesn't sound like a question.
But no, yeah, definitely one of mine. So all I can usually say to people going through no contact is usually the first week or two is really, really difficult. But the importance that has been shown consistently, and especially if you've been to my website and listened to any of the more recent success stories that I've interviewed for a couple of hours, you really get to understand the importance of quote unquote moving on from your ex as a way to get the ex back if that's what you want to do. So usually, no matter what you want to do, whether get your ex back or move on from your ex, you're always going to want to start by doing a no contact rule and putting that entire period of no contact on basically just healing it, focusing on yourself and moving on from your ex. So I always try to tell people, it's like, yeah, you want your ex back right now, but do a no contact rule first, focus on moving on. And then at the end of the no contact rule, make it the decision again. And, it's like 50-50 split. Half the time people want to just move on. Half the time they want to kind of move forward with getting their ex back. But I cannot really overstate the most important aspect of this, and that's moving on. That's kind of a hard pill for people to swallow, but that's actually what works. And if you understand why it works for a dismissive avoidant, like I said, most exes are dismissive avoidant. Dismissive avoidants have been shown to have this period of nostalgia that will happen eventually, but only after they feel that you're not a threat anymore. And the best way to make yourself not a threat is to move on. So yeah, I know it's not a question, Brody, but that's one of mine.
Yeah, that's great. And I was actually going to ask you, Chris, your overall philosophy with breakups in general. Like, what have you seen are some of the most powerful principles as far as to embrace, like this one you just talked about, moving on as a best way to get the ex back, or actually move on and have a better situation in your life? Do you have any other big philosophies like that are kind of cornerstones that you believe in that someone should really adopt or practice in the midst of a breakup?
Yeah. So I'm really big on, like I said, we polled our group. We know most of the exes that they're trying to deal with are dismissive avoidance, but by far, probably 90 to 95% of the people in our community have really anxious attachment styles. So for us, if you want to get like sciencey and technical about it, it's all about trying to give people the correct patterns and methods to having a more secure outlook on life. So changing that anxious attachment style to a more secure attachment style. And not only does that have the benefit of you helping you kind of move on, but helping you attract maybe the right type of partners. And sometimes that is your ex. We've had a ton of success stories where people have gotten their exes back, they're married to their exes, things have been good. But I will also say this, it's really interesting. I did a study to try to figure out, one of the things that I feel like I'm really honest about is our process. We think kind of works to help get exes back at probably a greater rate than many of our peers, but half the people who get their exes back end up breaking up again. So to me, that tells me same mistakes are just being present. So I got curious to see how if the length of time it took to get back together had any impact on if couples stayed together. So what we found is people who rush back into getting these impulsive decisions, getting back together really quickly, every single one of those individuals was broken up again within a year. There was only one exception between the success stories that I interviewed. All the people that took a very long time to get back with their ex, they dated a few other people, they had a huge secure mindset shift. They became more secure at the end. I think 3 out of the 4 were still together. So that really highlights the point of you should really be engaging in healthy patterns to help make you more secure. Start surrounding yourselves with secure individuals so that they can almost show you the patterns of what it's like to be more secure. And that just kind of, I think a community of individuals is kind of an important point of this, because they can give you kind of help along the way, but also hold you accountable. So we can have like these layers of accountability when you're going through struggles. And I'm sure Antia knows all about that. She's got a pretty large community.
Well, it's great because it's almost like the community can become a surrogate for those needs they were trying to get met in the relationship, right? Those needs for connection, for support, somebody to vent with. That could also be that emotional release, maybe. So I could see community can be that, such a great safety and support structure to have in the midst of a breakup. I know I didn't have that a lot when my big breakup happened in my early 20s, and so I ended up just going to the bars a lot and doing karaoke and not really having a great, like, empowering community around.
You got the karaoke community, man. That's the best.
Yeah, it was nice. It served its purpose at that time in my life.
Are you gonna like show us your karaoke chops now?
Oh, he's pretty good, actually.
I used to have a bunch of videos actually on YouTube. I took them down, but I was more of a rapper, a karaoke rapper. So I would
before he was the love advice guru, he was the karaoke rapper.
Exactly. I was the rapping love guru.
You actually produced and wrote your own rap songs too, so you're pretty.
Oh, you were serious about it.
You know what I mean? Oh yeah,
I was pretty serious about it. I was like, this could possibly be a career, but I was more just like enjoying the experience. And actually, it's funny because a lot of rap songs and a lot of songs in general are about breakups, as you've probably seen, right, Chris?
Yeah, lots.
It's an interesting phenomenon, and is, again, I think part of that emotional release that people are craving in the midst of a breakup, and also the yearning for those feelings again. I know when I was in my breakup, it's like this feeling almost like a potential future has been cut off. So it's almost like a limb has been cut off, right? It's like all that future you could have had is now it's no longer there, and like missing that. I mean, that's a bit dramatic, but
no, if you ever talk to any of the people in our community, that's right on the mark.
Yeah.
Not like that. Yeah, it's almost like an entire timeline, it's like not just like a lot, it's like a whole life, like a whole legacy that you could have had with someone, right? But
the imagined legacy, the imagined potential.
Yeah, the imagined
fantasy.
Potential.
Yeah.
And I think there's like so many pieces, I mean, one is that it's like such a fantasy, but it has become such an addiction. And I think like a breakup forces you to face that addiction, right? Because the fantasy is obviously crumbling. I mean, the reality is you sit in your apartment and cry your eyes out, right? So now you get to actually look at your addiction and like, wait a minute, I didn't even know this guy. Like, I didn't even know, you know what I mean? Or because I always believe when something like this happens, there's something that wasn't expressed, right? It wasn't expressed in the beginning. There wasn't like there was no atmosphere created, like of authenticity, transparency. You know what I mean? Like, I never believe that like a breakup just happens out of nowhere. When a woman's like, oh, just, I walked in the door and there were the divorce papers. I'm like, sure, nothing else happened before that, right? Like, you just like hunky-dory, everything is great. And so what are some of this? Have you done like any research on that? Or what's your experience of that, Chris, is actually being able to see, maybe even prevent breakups, but definitely able to see like this could be heading towards. Those are like for sure signs that you're heading for a breakup.
Well, to kind of go back to your point of, there's always kind of like these warning signs. I've found that a lot of times when people feel like a break.
Who just froze?
Uh-oh, Chris, you're cutting out a little bit. Oh, you should be back now.
Chris?
Hello?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I was about to make such a good point too.
Okay.
So going back, a lot of times people think their breakup is out of the blue. It's not, it's really not. Just do not tell you at all. They're having almost the internal conversation in their head about wanting to leave you, and then it feels to you like out of the blue. But if you really look at it, I think that the thing to really pay attention to is twofold. We can kind of go artsy with it and like listening to your gut. Like usually your gut is kind of on, this person really well. But I think also if you want to get very technical with it, you got to look at the amount of time that they're investing into you, whether that's texting, going on dates, alone time together. If they're pulling back, and this is one of the pieces of advice that we tell our men and women when they get their exes back. It's really important that when you sense that your partner's pulling back, that you also give them some space as well. Because a lot of times what's happening is when they pull back and you sense that they're pulling back, you overcorrect and try to solve the problem. And that makes you appear desperate and anxious and all that stuff. So you almost have to go against your own programming a little bit and do what all your thoughts and emotions and body are telling you to do. And that's to do nothing, give them some space. And we have our approach to keeping relationships together ever since we started recommending that. And even when a lot of clients trying to get their exes back, a lot of times they mess up because they're just wanting to go too fast. They're not kind of doing the push and pull mechanism of sensing when they're pulling back, you need to kind of pull back. So in a way, yes, there's something wrong. But also I think a lot of times it's exacerbated because when you're sensing a breakup is happening, what are you trying to do? You're trying to fix the problem. And actually what that person probably needs is some space. Sometimes they're just jerks and they're cheating on you and stuff like that. But generally speaking, we're not seeing a ton of those type of situations coming through our program, because usually if cheating is kind of the line where most people, they don't want to get their ex back at that point. But yeah, do you have any secret tips in the tool jar or the toolbox, Antia and Brody?
Secret, and Brody can probably add onto it too. But I will just go with like from the get-go, because then of course the question is, how do I make sure that I'm sort of, maybe that he expresses some of the internal dialogue that he has, right, with me. And I think that has to be established like from the get-go. That's why I always tell my women from the get-go, share something vulnerable about you. Share something, especially if you're really professional, polished and beautiful and all the things, right? Like say something, hey, something you don't know about me is whatever, you know what I mean? Because then you hand him the resume to be like, oh, I can be authentic here. And preferably it's really something that doesn't put you in a good light. Because you already look so great, you know what I mean? You already have the perfect career and all the things. So you can afford to do a little something that takes you out of sort of the performance mask, so to say, and let them see you. And then what happens is, when I called myself out, I said, I wanted to manipulate you. I wanted to, that, and Brody can speak to that, maybe how he perceived that when I was like vulnerable early on with him, and how that helped us to create like an authentic and transparent atmosphere where he can talk about when a part comes up for him, that wants to run or that wants space or all of these things, because I truly believe that's actually how it starts. It doesn't start with like, I want to leave the relationship. It usually probably starts with something like, yeah, man, I need more space, or, I need to hang out more with my friends, or, I'm losing myself, whatever, right? But then there's this codependent pattern that like, but I can't tell her because, then she's going to get scared, and I don't want to make her feel scared. And then I'm not going to say anything. I just internalize it. And eventually.
And usually they create that perception because they've seen you deal with other problems in an anxious way. So they're automatically going to assume, I can't tell you this because you're going to react the same way to me. So I just need to internalize it, keep it inside. So excellent point.
Right. Like, so Brody, why don't you share how you perceived that when I was calling myself out and said something that
putting him on the hot seat here.
Yeah.
Now he's got to say something super nice.
Yeah, well, it was actually just like what you said, Chris, is like I had experienced that in my last relationship where I felt I couldn't really tell her things that were things I was unhappy about or dissatisfied by, because she was already kind of on the verge of like depression, deep anxiety. She was definitely an anxious attachment style. And it was really, she was like emotionally fragile. That was the word, emotionally fragile. So it was really hard to have tough conversations with her. So a lot of stuff ended up getting stuffed under the rug. And that led to the gradual dissolving of the relationship. But when I met Antia, that was one thing that was really different, was she was able to tell me things like, part of me wants to manipulate you right now. And I would be like, wow, that's different.
Yeah, that's maybe the first time I've heard that before. I'm sure you too.
Yeah. Well, it takes a lot of trust on her part too, that I'm not going to then not trust her, because she's basically revealing to me there's parts inside of her that may not be so trustworthy or that may want to hurt me in some way. But the fact that she can talk about it actually shows that she has control over it. So that's what I think is one of the important leaps from anxious to secure attachment, is that you can actually, you're no longer like self-identifying with the anxiety, but you're actually almost able to see your own anxiety from a third person perspective and see the patterns and see what you're doing and be like, oh, why am I doing that? Or, oh, that's not really healthy. Or maybe I should work on that a little bit. And so, and then you showing the other person that you have that, when you're able to talk about yourself almost from a third person, like, if Antia would have said to me, like, Antia wants to manipulate you right now, or like talking about yourself in the third person. And now the other person is like, wow, so you do have a lot of self-awareness. I mean, you don't need to go that far with it, but like, talking about your stuff and being vulnerable, and so you can get real with each other. So that was powerful, I think.
Well, I think also there's something to be said about the amount of confidence it takes to be that vulnerable and share something like that, because you don't actually know how the other person's going to take it. I'm assuming this conversation happened before you guys were like together, you're kind of in that talking stage. And then she's basically laying out like, oh yeah, hey, by the way, I want to manipulate you. That could be taken a very wrong way, but it takes a certain amount of confidence to be able to risk that and be that vulnerable. Luckily, you took it the right way.
Yeah, and that's an important piece, is like a part of me. So I think that's part of the separation, is realizing that the anxiety is just a part of you, or the even the depressed part of you is just a part of you, rather than it's the whole me and this is my stuff and I'm never going to change and I'm in it. It's like separating yourself from yourself a bit, and diffusing the different parts, I think it helps to give that control and make the other partner feel safe. So that was a big piece of it too.
And I don't think it was necessarily confidence as it was just a value of mine, I would say, so like you have certain values where you're like, I don't know if I was the most confident in that moment, but I just knew that if what I think, what I say, what I do is not in alignment, right, then I'm not in integrity. And so what that means is like the relationship will crumble bit by bit. It's just going to happen because the relationship has no foundation to stand on. And so I realized, like, look, the relationship's going to end anyways. Like if I don't say anything now, like the relationship is going to end, because there's going to be some weird space between the two of us. I'm holding back. Then I'll probably project because I don't trust myself, so I don't trust him, and then I project that onto him. And so I'm like, okay, well, since the relationship, it's kind of bonus, you know what I mean? Since the relationship is probably would end anyways. At least like now I have nothing to lose because it's going to end anyways. So I think if you come from that perspective, right, and say, well, I don't want to have a relationship where that's not going to be fulfilling to me. It's not going to make me happy, to where I have to hide and where I have to make myself wrong and judge myself and suppress my true thoughts and feelings, right? So it was like actually good that I did that like from the get-go, because I could see if that's a guy who can hang, but it wasn't really coming from confidence. It was more coming from a place of like, what kind of relationship I wanted, because I mean, my internal dialogue was telling me I'm nuts when I was planning to tell him, they're like, you're insane. Like, you're giving all your power away right now, all your ammunition that you have to fight this guy, to get what you want. You know what I mean? That ego part is about separation, right?
Yeah.
It's like making your partner the opponent. And, but maybe something easier to do for women is like, one thing I did even earlier than that was I was telling Brody that I had an anxious attachment style, because same reason. He's going to be anyways. Why is she acting so weird? You know what I mean? I may as well tell him, because it's going to end anyways. So that's when you always like ask yourself that, like, girlfriend, I got news for you. You know what I mean? It's going to end anyways, because like the guy's not going to trust you, or he's going to feel you're weird, or then you're going to become passive aggressive, or you become resentful towards him because he distanced himself, because he doesn't know what's wrong with you. And, I'm like, okay, there's something called an anxious attachment style. Here's how it shows up. And here's how I deal with it. That's literally how I talked to Brody about it. And Brody, you want to say more about like what you thought about that when I told you that?
Yeah, it was the same thing as before, same reaction, shows awareness. And it was, it was great, because then I had a kind of a guide map to know kind of what I'm dealing with. And it's not just me causing her to be like that. So that's also, I think, was valuable. But I wanted to mention also, we had another question. This one is also from Chris's channel. This is a man. He said, 100 days in NC after 14 years. 100 days in no contact after 14 years.
100 days. Oh man. Look, I'm just going to cut you up. Like, the highest we ever recommend is 45 days. So he's like double the amount. Okay. Sorry.
He's an overachiever.
Yeah.
Yeah. After 14 years together. Wow. She is avoidant. He says she reaches out every 2 weeks, small talk, but every time I try to be more kind with her, she says, I don't want you to have false hopes. Any idea? I mean, it sounds like they were probably married. They were together for that long. Maybe she still wants a friendship. What are your thoughts on that, Chris, on a situation like that?
So like, just going back, if she is indeed an avoidant, the smartest thing you can do if you want her to open up to you is make yourself a non-threat. So you need to shift the paradigm. Right now, she believes that you want something more. You need to do something and basically start dating other people, or flat out say, like, I'm not interested, sort of like harping off of what Antia did to you. Antia was like, I'm in an anxious attachment style and everything. Just basically straight up tell her, like, look, I don't want to be together anymore. And I think you'll start to find, if you are authentic with that conversation, you really mean it.
Oh, we might have just lost Chris a little bit again. So I'll kind of riff on that a little bit until you come back, Chris. But
am I back?
Oh yeah, there you go.
Okay. So yeah, basically just make yourself a non-threat, and then I think the conversation flow will open up where you can kind of create an actual connection, as opposed to just her reaching out every 2 weeks.
Yeah, she's still keeping him at arm's length, and even saying to him, I don't want to give you false hopes, because she knows, she's coming from the frame like, I know you want me back. I know you want a relationship again. I don't want to lead you on, because I don't want that yet or ever. And so, yeah, I could see that, giving them safety so that they feel like there's no longer like this grasping energy. It's like,
exactly,
hey, I've released it, I've let go. And I guess the key with that it has to be really authentic. Like, it's so easy to say the words, but I'm sure the other person will still be able to easily feel there's still that extra level of like wanting to talk a little longer on the phone, wanting to go a little deeper. Like he says, I try to be kind to her. I imagine that's him like saying things like, compliments or
emotional support. Like, I'll be there for you.
Yeah, I'm
right,
there for
exactly.
you. Yeah. So
Which
that's
is very
that's
typical for
energetic.
the anxious attachment style, right? So when a person withdraws, somebody else may be like, okay, well, let them withdraw, right? The anxious is like, now it's time to fight.
Yes.
Now it's time to lay it on double, triple, bring on the compliments, bring on the gifts, the poetry, the surprise gifts that are
Oh, the poetry. Yes, the poetry.
I mean, I've seen
Yeah.
it, heard it
Oh,
all.
I'm guilty of that. The long emails. Oh my
Like,
God.
and
I once used, I don't know why I thought this would work, and I'm sorry this is a tangent, but in high school it was like a thing to take soap or like washable soap and like write notes on people's cars, and I liked a girl and I did that to her. It did not go over well. She never talked to me again.
Oh,
Actually, I think she flat out rejected me and then didn't talk to me again. So yeah, I think we're all guilty of the anxious thing.
Oh, well, I love that you did what you wanted to do. You know what I mean? And I think that's a piece
Well,
too.
that's the thing. I didn't want to do it. I felt like my best friend at the time strong armed me into doing it. He's like, you need to do this if you like her. And I was like, yeah, that seems like a good idea. And I should have just trusted my gut.
That's the thing, I mean, in high school, just our peers, our coaches, and that's just like not the best thing.
No.
And we really give them a lot of weight, a lot of power,
Yes.
those peers, you know what I mean? You literally start taking actions like that. But I mean, for this guy who said that, right? The other piece also is it's like healing your own attachment style, because I mean, it goes only so far to use all this willpower, because what Chris talked about, that's really saying like, you can work your own nervous system, right? That's like in total fight or flight right now. And to be like, okay, dude, like just chill out, right? And so it's kind of like when a child throws a temper tantrum and we're like, just be quiet. It's not going to happen. You know what I mean? It's like, or saying like the child is throwing a temper tantrum, you're saying, can you just sit in a lotus position and just like meditate for a little bit, right? And the child will be like, are you out of your mind? It's probably going to scream even louder. And that's kind of like how the fight or flight mechanism works in our brain, right? Like the more we want to suppress it, the louder it gets, So what that means, like in addition to what Chris said, it's actually healing your own attachment style, right? Actually really seeing what it's really originated from, why you're drawn to a woman who treats you this way. You know what I mean? Like if you have a healthy attachment style, you're gone, you're moving on. You know what I mean? I remember when I was dating Brody and I did something where I wanted to manipulate, and I really did it. And he set boundaries, I mean, I drove from San Francisco to LA to punish him. And that was where he drew the line. And then just tell him on the phone passive aggressively, oh, I'm in LA with my friend, like I can't go out with you tonight because I'm in LA. I'm 8 hours away from you. And so, when I came back, he's like, you're never going to do this again. Right? This is like a secure attachment style who's like, I'm walking. I'm not dealing with this. There's no begging or blaming or any of this. This is the boundary, And so that's like the piece that you have to understand for yourself. It's like you're asking yourself, like, what is it that I actually want?
Yeah.
And how okay is that for me to have a woman who, I mean, you could say it's disrespectful, to talk to you, but then say, I don't want to keep your hopes up. It's kind of playing games. It's kind of playing with your heart, So anyways, what do you have to say about that, Chris?
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, he did 100 days of no contact. And the number one mistake I see people making is when they do a no contact rule, they don't do anything to, like you said, heal their attachment style. Because that's really what we preach a lot of times, which is doing that work, trying to make you at least more secure. You had 100 days and it seems kind of like you're back to where you started. Also, I mean, I don't know much about the situation other than just what Brody read, but it does seem like there was maybe a marriage involved, which I'm assuming adds an extra layer of complexity to this. Together 14 years, even if there wasn't, they're together 14 years. That's a really long time to let go of someone. So I can understand maybe why you'd be having a difficult time doing that, but the correct advice is basically a combination of what Antia and I just said, which is like heal the attachment style, set the boundary, change the paradigm, stuff like that.
Yeah, awesome. And before we start wrapping it up for today, I also want to hear from you, Chris, if you wouldn't mind sharing. I want to know, like, what's like the craziest story you've heard of, like a breakup or like a breakup that led then to a reunion. What was like the most fascinating story or crazy story that you can recall, if any?
I can give you a crazy breakup story. Um, well, I mean, one of our former coaches called me after having a coaching session a couple of years ago, and she said, "Hey, just to let you know, you might be getting a call from the cops." And I go, "What?" She said, "I'm pretty sure my coaching client is part of a cult." And I was like, I had to call the cops on this place. They're like asking her to do some crazy stuff. So that might be like she was trying to get she wasn't part of the cult. She was trying to get an ex that was part of a cult back. So obviously it was, I don't get that ex back. But yeah, I mean, you get really crazy scenarios like that. As far as crazy stories of couples getting back together, I interview a lot of couples, and there's no really like crazy story. Sometimes I'll interview success stories and I'll hear like some of the things that these guys did to these women. Like the one that kind of comes to mind is maybe not technically a success story, but we interviewed her as a success story because her ex did technically ask for her back, but she was pregnant. Her ex broke up with her, and then she ended up marrying the next guy. We get a ton of situations like that where they're able to use the community that we've created to kind of do some of the stuff that all three of us are talking about, which is like the boundaries, the secure attachment style, and attract a partner that they then get married to. But actually, our head coach right now is one of our very first success stories who ended up getting her ex back and is now married to him, got married like last year. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, the cult story is maybe the craziest one that I've dealt with.
Wow, that's interesting. So why was the cops involved?
Well,
He
I
was trying to
don't
get out of the
I
cult.
don't
They
want
wouldn't
to.
let
I'm
her?
not sure what I can say. That's
Oh, okay. Yeah. You
that's
don't have
like
to
that's
say more.
a sort of secrecy type thing,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
for people's privacy. But let me just say, it was pretty scary and serious, and
Oh, okay.
we've had to do that a couple of times, unfortunately, where we've had to involve the police.
Oh, right. Wow. Yeah, I can
And
imagine.
it's crazy to me when you call. We've had we've had multiple situations where I've actually had to call. So I mean, we're all US based, but I've had to actually call overseas to like the UK, and their their cops are horrible. Like I'll call and I'm trying to explain the situation to these people on like the line, and they're just not believing me. And I'm like getting all the information and they're rude to me. And then they don't get back to you to let you know if the person's okay or not. So
Wow.
Yeah,
yeah,
and that's
I'm
of course,
venting.
it has of course like protocol and all the things, right? But what's like one story where you felt like a woman who did like an incredible turnaround, who maybe had come in a little anxious working with you, but then maybe through your advice was able to get her ex back, or or at least like started sort of the transformation process, and the ex really saw quote unquote the change and the transition.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our success stories are kind of in that vein, to be honest with you. I interviewed a woman Monday. Sorry, days are blending together for me. I've been working like 10-hour days for like 5 days straight. But I interviewed a woman on Monday. It was really, really interesting. Her ex was a severe dismissive avoidant, like to the point where they'd go sometimes like a week without talking when they were together. And obviously she was really, really anxious after the breakup. And then kind of just integrated into the community and really kind of took what we were saying to heart. But the reason I'm highlighting her is she got her ex back a year ago, and I'm just now interviewing her. She did not consider herself a success story until she got her ex to say, "I love you." So she got her ex back, but it wasn't until her ex said, "I love you," which was like literally a few days ago, that she finally posted in our community and was like, "Oh, I've got a success story," and wanted to come on the podcast and everything. And then I interviewed another woman who just basically I think she went through a divorce and she wanted to get her ex-husband back. And then put at our advice or contact rule, put all of her focus in on herself, and she ended didn't just start asking for her back, but she said every single ex that she's ever had after like all of these changes came and asked for her back.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. We couldn't hear the last part because you cut off. So what happened?
Oh man. Okay. So basically she just
It's a
basically had
cliffhanger.
like this huge, yeah, for like a real one for real. She had this like huge shift where she did like really amazing at work. She got like all these really national type opportunities. And not only did her ex come back, but every single ex that this is her quoting her. So I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt, but every single ex she's ever had came and asked for her back. So it works if you put the focus on yourself.
Yeah, it's like, you know, there's something.
And she didn't take any of them back, just to let you know.
I love that. That's so good.
Nice.
And that really shows, you know, when you are in your zone, when you're on purpose, right? When you're like true to yourself, like what's your unique alchemy? Like, it's so attractive. You know, men come out of the woodworks and you don't even know why, because they just want to have a piece of that pie. That's like so exciting.
Yeah.
And so speaking of that, what kind of free gift do you have to offer, Chris? I know we have a special gift. We're going to put the link in the comments below as we wrap up and in the description. But what's a free gift you'd like to offer for some of the women or men watching today who would love to maybe explore more of the work you do?
Yeah, probably the best thing you could do to kind of reach me and get quote unquote the free gift is to take our free quiz that can help you understand what kind of chance you have of getting your ex back, to figure out whether or not you should be trying to get your ex back. So yeah, simply just going to www.exboyfriendrecovery.com. And then just basically right there on the homepage, you can find an area where you can take the quiz. So there you go. Free gift. Yay.
Everybody loves free gifts, right?
Yeah, they do.
We're going to put that again below in the description, comments. It was great to have you on today, Chris. Glad we got the technology working here. It was relatively smooth for our first one. This is great with an expert, so I'm happy about that. And yeah, and then also if you want to take our free quiz we have for a woman particularly who wants to attract a man to share her life with, a new man, you can go to mymquiz.com or getlovequiz.com is our new love patterns quiz to cover your love pattern. We'll put a link for that in somewhere in the description below as well. So awesome, man. Any final words for today, anyone?
I just wanted to say thanks, guys, for having me on. I really appreciated the opportunity and the great conversation.
Yeah, this was fun, man.
Yeah, and then also like for everyone who's watching to just like know there is hope, and sometimes it's actually the hope is in letting the hope die. It's not. It's kind of like it's a play on words, but it really is. And what that means is like letting the hope die of like an old reality, of like an old illusion that you have created, so that the real, you know, 5 months before I met my husband Brody, I said my man knows, because my reality always was like men need to think about it, sleep on it, meditate on it, wash their hamster's hair, right? And when I said my man knows, you know, that was the new reality. So like that's when you let the hope die and create a new one.
Well, you just had to say the perfect thing, didn't you, Antia?
I don't know. Maybe it's just I'm shooting too many videos. I don't know what's happening.
Had to put the little star.
That's like the perfect ending.
Cherry on top of the.
It's like,
I'm sitting over here. Thanks for the opportunity, guys. And you're just like, oh yes, your reality is your.
Drop a knowledge bomb.
Yeah.
All right. Well, awesome, guys. Thanks, Chris. Take care, and we'll have to do this again sometime.
Absolutely, we do.
All right. Later, man. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.